So you're about to see here what happens when you make sense on Fox News. This is host Jessica Tarlov, and she's going to get piled on by a bunch of cackling hyena idiots. And really, you know, I've seen this clip now 3 times. It's like the Twilight Zone. It's like you have the last reasonable person on Earth and then a bunch of, like, overconfident, cocky morons. Take a look.
Security advisor was speaking last night and had some thoughts on this, which I would recommend everyone look at. He's obviously extremely concerned about this. And the second thing, which I think is important to bring up in any conversation about Iran, is the nuclear deal that we pulled out of. And there are many people, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, that had confirmed that the Iranians were not violating the terms of the deal. And we need to be considerate of the fact that we may not be in this situation whatsoever. And I understand the asymmetric warfare argument, but that if we had stayed in that deal, that we would not be dealing...
That's a ridiculous argument.
It isn't a ridiculous argument.
It is a ridiculous argument. And when you say that we weren't allowed to inspect any facilities where we thought things were going on, they had to designate where we could look, and it wasn't anytime, anywhere. The deal was worthless.
There are so many...
Ridiculous. I just want to add this. We got to where we are right now with Iran because of the deal, because of the billions of dollars in money sent to Iran, and the billions of dollars in business that all these other nations could do with Iran, and funding terrorism in the region. That's how we got here.
Returning money that we had taken is not the same as handing them cash to commit terror.
It's handing them money. And as by the way, that money was not supposed to be given to Iran, Jessica. It was supposed to be money.
We can all agree that some of it has been spent on terrorism, right, Buck?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think we can get there. No matter where that cash was
spent.
Even John Kerry admits
there are so many officials on record saying that Iran was complying with the deal.
Because there was nothing in it.
That's not true, Melissa. You think all of these countries...
There was no pain for the Iranians in that deal, but we could do this all day.
All right. We could, but we can't.
That's hard to watch. The people who sound the most confident there and they're like shouting her down have no idea what they're talking about. None whatsoever. They called it, quote, ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument to say that pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal led to this situation that we're in right now. But that's exactly what it is. See, in the minds of the idiot Fox hosts, they think America is right by definition in these conflicts. So they're working backwards from that. They're not allowing themselves to look at it objectively because they think in order to be pro-American, you need to always be on the team of America, and therefore you have to rationalize and excuse everything that we do that's wrong or bad or unjust or stupid or contradictory or whatever it may be. So just so everybody knows, that deal, yes, it was verified over a dozen times by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that Iran was following the agreement to a T. Now, the counter-argument from the idiots is, oh yeah, but then what about the places that weren't inspected? Okay, so in other words, it is impossible to craft a deal where they say, it's a good deal. Because no matter what, they'll turn around and say, oh yeah, well maybe there's places that weren't inspected. What's your evidence for that? There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence at all to say, oh, there's places that weren't inspected. No, all of the sites, like what do you think? The entire international community sat around and said, okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. We're only going to look at like 10% of the places where they have nuclear energy. No, the entire world. That deal, if anything, was overly restrictive on Iran. There's so many checks so often. I mean, the IAEA was up their ass. They had very strict limits. Okay, you can only enrich uranium to a point of power for the power grid or for research, and we're incredibly stringent. And the breakaway time was so long, there's no evidence whatsoever that they had a nuclear weapons program. So basically what the Fox hosts are saying is, no matter what happens, all we're going to counter with is, oh yeah, but maybe there's some places where they're not following the deal. So it doesn't matter how strict the deal is, and it was as strict as humanly possible, they're always going to say that. So there's nothing you could say, because they just don't trust the Iranians at all, and they don't even trust it when it's verified at all. So there's nothing the U.S. could have done or there's nothing the world could have done where they would have turned around and said, you know what? Awesome. It worked out here. Then also the lie about, like, we gave them billions of dollars. And again, credit to Jessica Tarlov, because she turns around and goes, no, that's money that we stole from them. It was their money. And under the deal, I mean, could you imagine a deal like this, guys? Under the deal, we give them back their own money in exchange for the international community regulating them nonstop when it comes to, nuclear energy. So that deal is like so biased in favor of us, because it's like, as a matter of principle in the first place, why should you be able to just jack our money? But they did. They jacked Iran's money, and then sure, we'll give it back, but only if X, Y, and Z. These conditions are met. You let us go in there nonstop and regulate and make sure you don't have a nuclear weapons program, so on and so forth. Even after the U.S. pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, they kept following it for months. And then finally, when they were like, okay, we're not going to follow it anymore, the U.S. turned around and goes, aggression. What? We were aggressive to them. Are you insane? So it's so frustrating. And there's no doubt we wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for the actions of the U.S. Guys, something they'd never tell you on Fox News. We're waging an economic warfare against we're waging economic war against Iran. We're sanctioning things going into that country that's wildly illegal. The International Court of Justice, which is the top court at the UN, told the U.S., you stop sanctioning medicine going into Iran. You can't do that. That impacts civilian, population centers massively. You can't do it. It's illegal under international law. Stop. So what do? We pulled out of the court and we chastised them, and we kept sanctioning the medicine going into Iran. Are they going to tell you that on Fox News? They're not going to tell you that. And if anybody were to bring it up, what they'd say is, well, what do you want to do? You want to let them keep sponsoring terrorism? Which leads to the final point, which is they argued there, and this is how you know they're just idiots who are fucking regurgitating whatever propaganda they hear. Number one state sponsor terror. Number one state sponsor terror. Saudi Arabia is clearly the number one state sponsor of terror. Are you insane? The 15 of the 19 hijackers on 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, right this second, is funding Sunni extremist militias, Salafist militias on the ground in Yemen and Syria. Those are jihadists. That's who they are. Acting like Iran is the number one state sponsor of terror. Oh, please. So, what's stunning to me is not even the debate they had here, because I was surprised that one host was making sense. What surprised me is this microphone fucked up? Sorry, guys. What surprised me is the over-the-top, obnoxious tone where everybody who's dead wrong is so convinced that they're right. Like the idea, what do you mean? Obviously the U.S. is right, and obviously, Iran's the problem here, and obviously pulling out of the Iran deal didn't lead to escalation with Iran. It's almost escalation by definition. We, the U.S., are pulling out of the deal. And that's not escalation or provocative, and that's not going to lead to further problems. Of course it does! Of course it does! Of course it does! They try to have their cake and eat it too, where we act offensively, we ruin diplomacy, and then we turn around and go, I can't believe they're acting offensively and ruining diplomacy. What a joke.